Hello everyone, welcome back to the University of Law podcast for our next episode of Everything You Need to Know When Starting at the University of Law series. Today I'm delighted to be joined by John Watkins to discuss the Employability service at the University of Law. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners, John?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is John Watkins and I'm the university's Director of Employability, which gives me responsibility for helping students to think about their futures, securing employment in the short term and hopefully setting themselves up for a good future career.
Fantastic. Right. We'll jump straight in with the first question, if that's all right with you. So the first one we had is getting a job after university can be quite daunting. So what can students do to build a strong CV during their time at university, which hopefully will help them get a job after they graduate?
Well, you're right, Darren. It is definitely a daunting prospect, but I think the first reassurance is that many thousands of students go through the experience every year and they do end up with something, not always immediately, but certainly, higher education is very well geared to helping people succeed. I think as you start out, the ambition really is to have a CV that you feel does you justice. And so if you look at it and think, well, there's a few areas that I can't at the moment honestly say that I'm doing particularly well in or haven't got experience in, then the goal is to try and add to those. That could be on the academic front. If you've had some blips along the way, then in your immediate studies, do the best you can. Be showing off that the latest academic results are really, really good. That's the best possible way to start, as the top of the CV tends to be education focused. And then as you move through the sort of experience section, then try and bolster your experience by doing things that are related to what you want to do in the future. So if you've got some ideas about where you want to be, then try and do some things that show that you have tried that area, you've found that you like it, you've got some contacts, you know what you're letting yourself in for. And never forget the importance of those wider skills that you get from everyday hobbies and interests, sports and other things. Those are great for you on a personal level. They give you new people to engage with. They give you health benefits very often, but they also do develop a wide range of skills. And employers will be interested not just in what those skills are, but also you as a person. What do you get up to? You're going to be a colleague. You're going to be working with people for a long period of time, in which case you need to have something to say above and beyond answers to questions about the technical subject in hand.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with all of that. And I know that the university's employability service was fantastic. When I first joined, I went to them and said, I really don't know how to write a CV, to be honest. I don't really know where to start. The one I have wasn't very good for my first part-time job, and they were really fantastic in, like you said, talking me through the different parts of the CV and getting that to a high standard, and also in a more legal manner, because that's the route I was taking. But obviously, graduates can take various routes.
Yes, they can. And I think it's an important point you make there, that you don't want to avoid contact with the employability service because you feel as if you haven't got anything to really show off. And we'll find lots of people who've got no CV at all. They've got no LinkedIn profile. They really haven't thought about it. And in many cases, they come along and say, I really don't know what I want to do. And there's no problem with that. Clearly, the goal is to try and get a clearer idea as soon as you possibly can. But for many people, it will be quite some time before they actually do narrow down and decide this is the right thing for me. We see lots of career changers who perhaps made the wrong decision back in the original part of their career, and they've had to reflect upon it and make subsequent decisions. So the main real tip here is don't hold back. Don't think I'll wait until there's a good moment, wait until I'm more advanced. Go in there, you'll find a sympathetic ear, somebody who's seen thousands of students in similar situations, and that's really reassuring to know that you are no different to many others that have subsequently gone on to achieve success.
Yeah, you made a really good point as well about employers obviously looking at your grades and your experiences, but also just valuing you as a person. And I think in terms of CVs, it's really important not to discount an experience, because you might think someone's going to look at that and think that's a rubbish job, or it's not valuable, or a hobby that you think no one's going to find interesting. And actually, it's important to value all of your experiences, because you'll have gained something from it.
Yeah, not just gain something from it, but they've shaped you as a person. Yeah. And, we get involved in a variety of different things. The diversity out there of individuals and what they get up to is really very positive in terms of seeing the variety of people that could be working. So I think it's really about extracting the valuable bits. So it's not just about what you took from it, but thinking about how can I position this in a way that somebody reading it will think, oh, that's useful, that's valuable, that's helpful. And even if you try something that you've never tried it before, that shows an attitude of willingness to give things a go. And the reality is that once you get into the workplace, every single day you'll be asked to do something you've never been asked to do before. And that attitude of embracing that challenge and being willing to give it a go is symbolic from what you see on the CV from people giving things a try that they've perhaps not done in earlier years.
Yeah, absolutely. All brilliant points there. Just moving forward, the next question we had was how early should students start looking for jobs and, applying to those companies?
I think people should be thinking right from the outset, where do I want to go? If you work backwards and think, I'd love to leave university with a graduate job lined up, then you need to be in a very competitive position towards the end of your second year, because many times you'll be applying for something in your second year as it starts, your third year starts, and therefore you need to be able to know what you want to do and put across a competitive case. For you to be able to do that, you probably need to have done some useful things in your second year that give you the confidence to go into that. And in order for that to happen, you need to have done some things in your first year. So it starts almost immediately. It doesn't require you to do high level and very technical stuff, but just getting in environments where there are people. You're dealing with people. People are all different. People are respond in different ways. And the more that you can expose yourself to the variety out there, the better equipped you will be able to deal with the real workplace where anything could come across your desk, so to speak. And I think that willingness to embrace the opportunity to meet with people, deal with situations that may be new, may be uncomfortable, may be difficult, and that can happen in a retail setting, a hospitality setting. It doesn't need to be in the pure technical area that you want to go into. These are all very highly transferable skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be joining a law firm in a few months, but I don't think I realised up until I started applying to these firms how valuable my work experience at Lush was in cosmetics or other part-time roles I've had, and how valuable that was to me.
Yes, and that again comes back to the point of don't explain what you did, explain what could be extracted from that experience by the employer. So selling cosmetics is not going to be transferable, but listening to people as they explain what they're looking for, helping them, giving them a good customer client experience is exactly what employers are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question we've got is, interviewing can be scary. What advice would you give students having their first job interview, or perhaps their second and third, because they're always going to be a little bit nerve-wracking?
Yeah, they should be nerve-wracking. It's important. You're going for something that means a lot to you, otherwise you wouldn't be there, and you should have some nerves. It's like being involved in a play. When you go on stage, you shouldn't be relaxed and comfortable. You should be a bit nervous and the adrenaline should be pumping. But you want to try and give yourself the opportunity to do yourself justice. So think about the preparation. Get there on time. Don't be rushed. If you've been asked to do a presentation or you've been given information about what's going to happen, then plan what you're going to say, plan how you're going to handle the situations, and give yourself that comfort. As you walk through the door, somebody's likely to say, welcome, come in, and maybe you'll be mingling with other candidates or with other members of staff. So have something to say. Think about what's going on in the news, topical information that can allow you to hold a conversation in a casual environment. And it's hugely valuable as well to take advantage of employability services that may well offer you the opportunity, as the University of Law does, to have a mock interview. A mock interview puts you through your paces, gives you the feedback afterwards that says you answered that question really well, which you don't know at an interview because very rarely do you get that feedback. But if you get somebody saying, yep, that was spot on, then it gives you the confidence. And then to say, actually, the other questions, you didn't answer some of those quite so well. Here's some suggestions about how you might try and approach those. Again, just makes you feel a little bit more confident. And I suppose the other tip is that whatever's going on inside, nobody can see that. If your heart is pumping and you're feeling really nervous, then that's not visible. And so therefore keep it to yourself. Don't admit that you're nervous. Just do the best that you can and expect that most people will be in a similar sort of condition as they start their interviews. Yeah,
I think that's a really great point about making you feel prepared, because I remember before my assessment centre with the firm, I had a call with someone from the employability team just to talk me through the process, because I really didn't really understand what was going to happen, what this task entails. And that just calmed me down, because even though I may have not known exactly what was going to happen on the day, because you can't know, I felt more prepared. And that allowed me to go into it in a stronger position.
Yes, I think the thing that sometimes people like to know is, well, how do they assess you? And at a very simple level, there must be a mechanism where they are scoring the answers to your questions either with a grading or with a mark out of 5 or 10, because they have to come back and conclude who's got the highest mark, who are we going to offer a job to. So then you break it down. Well, why am I going to get a high mark? Well, you can see that this firm truly believes in the following things, and therefore you're going to have to extract those things out of your answers to be able to allow them to score highly. And that may well be, again, where people realize that you can have all the information ready, but unless you get the right bits out during the interview, they're not going to be able to have the evidence to give you the high mark, to give you the job at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think as well, if people ask me about my experience, I always just say it's whoever's sat in front of the, on the other side of the screen or on the other side of the table, they're just human beings who aren't looking to destroy you or trip you up. They're usually actively wanting you to succeed. And so, if you need them to repeat a question, or if you need to just take a sip of water, it's okay. They're not going to think, well, this person's not suitable or anything like that.
No, I think interviews are much more than perhaps they used to be, enjoyable and a chance for people to show what they're made of, rather than an interrogation that you come away feeling terrible experience. But you should expect every now and then that there's going to be a question that's very difficult, the question where you may need to stop and think. And as you say, humans on the other side of the table will allow you time to stop and think.
Yeah.
They'll perhaps appreciate and admire the fact that you haven't rushed in with an answer, but have been prepared to consider your thoughts before expressing them. So I think that's an important point to get across. And sometimes, you might well have to say, actually, I don't really know the answer to that question. Not to every question, because that could get you into trouble.
No.
But sometimes there's a question in there which is really designed to say, what would you do in a situation with a client where you didn't know the answer?
Yeah.
And what they don't want is for you to try and make up something on the spot that you hope the client will believe in. Sorry, client, I'm not 100% sure of that answer. I know somebody that is. I'll come back to you as soon as possible. That's the professional way of dealing with it. And again, gives a great symbol about what you would be like in the workplace. They want to trust you, but they also want to know that you're willing to ask for help when needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think our next question leads on really nicely. And that's, what advice would you give students for dealing with rejections from job interviews? So perhaps if it doesn't go as expected.
Again, the reality check here is that, often there's 100 applicants for one job or 500 applicants for one job. So 499 are going to be disappointed. And so you're in the vast majority if you don't get the job offer. And many people will apply for lots and lots of jobs before they get the one that ultimately makes it all worthwhile. So don't take it personally. Recognize that, other good candidates are out there, and you may well have lost fair and square. If you can get some feedback from the employer to find out whether it was a near miss, that you did very, very well, but there was just somebody better, or actually you came short on 3, 4, 5, 6 different areas, better to know, which way it is, because clearly the first means that you don't change very much, whereas the second one might mean you need to have a bit of an overhaul in how you approach things. So getting feedback, not every employer will do it, but some like to differentiate themselves in showing their human touch by giving that feedback, and that can be extremely helpful. And this is where, again, doing a mock interview will get some of that out in advance. But yeah, don't take it personally. Know that lots of other people have been there. I led an event last week where a very, very senior, very successful individual talked to students at the University of Law Moorgate campus and said, I had a massive file full of rejections when I was looking for my training contract. It was really difficult. And yet, 25 years later, here is the very successful individual. Ironically, I suspect he appreciated the opportunity he got because of the difficulty in getting there, and is probably better in supporting the next generation coming through and managing people, because he knows that things can go down as well as up. And that can actually therefore be turned very positively into your emotional intelligence, where interacting with people who are going to have setbacks, whether it's rejections or whether it's personal issues that go on or professional ones, if you can support people through that because you understand it, you'll be a far better manager, colleague, employee, employer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, I'm in the very lucky position of having a training contract now, but I got rejected from various firms at various stages, and whilst of course emotions are involved and you get upset or disheartened, I think looking back, when I did get rejected from various stages, perhaps at a video interview, when I then had a video interview with another firm, I thought, okay, this isn't quite as scary. I know what I did wrong there. I panicked. I didn't have water in front of me. Now I can hit the ground running with this one. And I think that's what I tried to take away from it.
It's called experience, isn't it? It's and this is why a number of people will look back and think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have looked at things in quite that way. And going through lots of interviews is a positive sign. You've got to interview stage, and therefore you must be doing something right. And yes, if you take every experience that you've been through and slightly refine and get slightly better, then it's got to be beneficial.
Yeah. Absolutely. So our next question, which I think you're probably the best person to answer, is what support is available at the University of Law to help students prepare for getting a job after leaving university?
Well, I think the University of Law Employability Service tries to treat everybody very individually. So there's no sense of, all of you in this group are looking for something and therefore all of you need this or all of you need that. People have different starting points. They come with different levels of confidence, different levels of previous successes and failures, different personal preferences, different ambitions. So very much treating somebody as an individual and then plotting a journey forward and trying to sort of see, well, what do you need? And we talked earlier about what needs to be on your CV. And therefore, it's about trying to look at the component parts that you've got. Some things will be wanted by every employer. So looking at academics as a start. Yeah. And then for most people, it's about building on the strengths, so really taking advantage of the fact that you're good at something to be able to show that you're better than lots of other people at it, and addressing the relative weaknesses. You don't want to have something that actually will catch you out, is known to be something that you can't do and won't do, because that will, if it doesn't get you in the interview process, will catch you out in the workplace once you've started. So individual support, one-to-one careers appointments. We did over 11,000 last year, so that's almost one per student. Not every student takes it up, so several are taking up more than one. And that impartial professional who's been there and done it before and supported others is so valuable. Participation in volunteering or pro bono to give you real life experience, even if you can't get a part-time job or you haven't got time for it, the opportunity to be testing out those skills in real life is very valuable. The mentoring scheme, very valuable again to people, particularly those who are lacking in contacts, maybe don't know anybody that's been in the area that they want to go in, to have somebody who is willing to give their time so as to be able to support somebody coming through. Just take advantage of that. There are so many things that perhaps are offered, sometimes too many things. I think there's an employer event tonight, tomorrow night, the night after. You can't go to all of them, so a bit of judgment needs to be taken. But overall, I think it's having a trusted advisor alongside who you can turn to in your highs and your lows to be able to guide you on what to do next.
No, I mean, I totally agree. And that was definitely my experience throughout my degree, from, like I mentioned earlier, going from not knowing what to do with my CV to then securing interviews and assessment centres all the way up through to accepting my training contract. And I definitely think, the employability service, it is personal, because I remember sitting in the library one day and Amanda, who runs pro bono at our Bristol campus, came along and said, "I've got this for you, Darren. I think it'd be really good." And it was helping at the Bristol Law Centre with welfare appeals, but it was one of the best things I did at university. And that's because Amanda did get to know me, and you build up a relationship, and it's really great.
Yeah, clearly there's some bias in my positive views towards the employability service, but I would also pay testament to lots of other universities that have a similar commitment and support. I think where the University of Law perhaps stands out is its real professional commitment, that we have a national infrastructure that means that if any student anywhere in the country, or indeed outside of the country with the online campus that we have, has a query or an issue, there is an infrastructure there to support. And that has pretty much, since the pandemic, been a 24/7 service. There are people that work in the employability service over the weekend and in evenings, and therefore things are turned around very quickly. We did not work on Christmas Day last year, but that was the only day. I have colleagues who are more than happy to get away from the family environment to be doing things on Boxing Day.
Yeah.
And students don't want to wait until someone's back in the office on the 4th of January to get feedback. They want it as soon as possible. So that's a big help, I think, in terms of that. And that does provide the complement to the local support. As you say, every campus has somebody who knows the local market, has the local relationships, can see the students in a personal capacity, to be able to say that actually if you're a Bristol student, what's going on in Manchester isn't directly relevant to you, but actually somebody that knows the ins and outs of the Bristol market or whichever area you're interested in is worth their weight in gold. And I think that's where the real added value comes.
No, I absolutely agree. So our next question, and I know you quite like this buzzword, it's what are your top 5 employability tips? Or top 3 if you can't quite get 5 off a...
I think almost my top tip to people is to put yourself in the shoes of other people. So be thinking about things from their perspective, not your own. You know yourself very well. You know what you're thinking. You know your rationale. You don't need to explain yourself to yourself. But others may not necessarily have the full picture. They may come from a different perspective. So if you can see it from their perspective, it's so helpful. And that's not just an employability tip in terms of thinking about the recruiter. What are they looking for? That's important. But it's also a personal tip. You know, in life, you will find relationships and situations where thinking about it from another angle is actually beneficial to be able to secure what you want. I think being yourself is really important. So don't pretend to be somebody else. It's just not worth it. It's a much more accepting world now of people's personal preferences and what they believe in, what they care about. And if you can find yourself an employer that is aligned with that, then you're going to enjoy going into work every day. You're going to get fulfillment from it. It's definitely a huge positive in that respect. So those are my first 2 tips. I did struggle to narrow it down to 5, but building a network, try and make sure that you realize that it's who you know, not what you know. I spend quite a lot of time with students who say, well, that's not fair. I don't know anybody. But with work, you can build that network, even if your starting point is quite low. Try new things. Don't be afraid to give things a go. You may be terrible at them, in which case don't do them again. Or you might discover that actually you're quite accomplished. And if that's the case, then it could give you all sorts of opportunities in the future. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. And don't be afraid to give feedback. Those are quite differentiating skills, and a willingness to speak up and say, I think this could have been done differently, can require a bit of bravery, but it will stand you out. And it's all summarized really in my term of trying to be an effective follower. Many people aspire for a leadership role, and that's great and something to look forward to. But for most people, as you start out in your career, you're going to be a follower, not a leader. So think about what encapsulates a good follower. And if you can get those things right, then you're somebody who's going to be highly attractive to any employer.
Brilliant. They're fantastic tips. So we've also had some questions come in from our listeners on our social media channels. So the first one is, what part-time jobs opportunities are there at the University of Law?
There are lots of opportunities, I think, for people to do part-time jobs, and it's an increasing feature now how people do blend their studies alongside doing some work. For some, it will be maintaining jobs, particularly with the University of Law, where many students will be commuter students. They can go back to their home environment and do the job that they've perhaps done previously, and maintain that. But there are also some jobs on campus. So there's employability ambassadors, student ambassadors who get involved in open days, the employability ambassadors in promoting the employability service and helping to find job vacancies that can be promoted more widely. I think one of the interesting things and trends over the last few years is the number of students who have gone on to work for the university, perhaps in a part-time capacity until something else happens. We have in our employability department a future pupil employability coordinator, somebody who has secured pupillage, but for 12 months and needs to find a way of occupying themselves, and they're doing that for us. And I think several other roles where people might be able to gain experience, not necessarily a place they intend to stay for very long, although who knows it, one or two people might decide that actually they like the higher education environment. It's something they've tried, they like it and might want to stay.
Absolutely. And then the other question we had, which follows on nicely from this one, is what type of job opportunities are available after my course?
Well, I think a wide variety of opportunities. Some people will sort of look at the pure graduate roles and think those are the things that I want to aspire to. And I think that's absolutely right to aspire to them. But there's many more roles now, which are perhaps sort of stepping stones towards those graduate opportunities. And people shouldn't worry about if they don't get that graduate role as they leave, if it takes 1, 2, even 3 years or more. There's still going to be, a good chunk of time to fulfill your potential within that. And if it takes time to find the right opportunity, it's better to find that right opportunity than do something that's not right for you and causes greater tension down the line. So there are definitely internships. There are part-time roles. There are more permanent roles. They could be semi-professional in terms of the sense that they're not the graduate role, but they're a stepping stone to it. In the legal profession, a lot of paralegal opportunities where people will aspire to get a training contract, a period of recognised training. And by doing well as a paralegal, that will open the door either in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or whatever time frame. But in the meantime, it enhances your employability. It strengthens your CV. If you've got a period of time on the CV where you've been working in a legal environment, then your opportunity to present yourself to a new employer is very strong. Equally within that, you should be looking to say, well, what can I do to really show that I am adding value within my current organisation? That will help me boost my case in front of my own employer, but also extract those things that I can put in my CV subsequently. People will also take some breaks, do some traveling, do some other bits and pieces, which is no harm whatsoever. You're going to be working potentially for a long period. So having that opportunity to broaden horizons whilst you can is absolutely great. And the nature of work is changing. So people sometimes looking at a portfolio career, they might do 2 or 3 jobs, or they might job share with somebody so that they're working part-time rather than full-time. So I think, again, engage with your local employability service to see the way in which the world is working, the flexibility of sometimes being able to work from home, sometimes from an office environment, or the hybrid does allow now a lot more flexibility than perhaps was once the case.
And I think that's such a good point about perhaps taking a gap year or traveling or a paralegal role if you haven't quite got the training contract, or perhaps you're not sure what you want to do. Because I think one of the stats is the average age of a qualifying solicitor is something like 29. So there's no sort of set route where you have to do every step, and if you don't take those steps, you fail. There's nothing like that.
No, not at all. And I think we look back on our careers as we get a bit further down the line, and there's going to be moments in it where you think, well, that worked well, or that didn't quite work so well. And there's often pivotal moments where something happens. And in my own case, I was made redundant a little bit out of the blue, and that's not anything that anybody wants to experience, but it often allows you to take stock. And I often say to people, no, pretend you've been made redundant, because it gives you a chance to sort of stop and think, am I happy? Is this what I want to be doing? Rather than be forced into it, where you then realize that you found something that was better than what you were doing before. Just have that moment to stop and think. And I think a lot of people will have multiple careers. We've seen some people at graduation recently, crossing the stage in their 60s, 70s, even one in their 80s who got a standing ovation. They may not necessarily be going on to practice law. They were doing it more for the sake of ticking it off their bucket list. But for those, even in their 60s, there's plenty of time to fulfill a new career from that point. And, never stop and think, right, I've made a decision. This is going to be it forever. And certainly for the University of Law, where predominantly we have law students, the law is going to be relevant to every single job you do, whether you're practicing as a lawyer or, certainly something totally different where you've got to comply with rules and regulations and employment law and health and safety. They will always be there. And sometimes taking your ball and playing with it in a different environment can be as fulfilling as actually being in the mainstream where everybody else around you is doing the same thing.
Absolutely. They're all brilliant points. And I think that nicely brings us to a close. So thank you so much for joining us, John. I'm sure our listeners are going to get a lot out of that.
My pleasure. Thank you, Darren.